Explore, meet, create.
Our next guest is an old friend of Slovenia. He could also be named ambassador of Slovenian meetings industry. Joining us is Padraic Gilligan, who will discuss the future of incentive travel. He will present the results of an extensive research conducted by the International Association site in 2020. Padraic, welcome to our virtual stage.
Here I am, Padraic Gilligan's my name. As Goresh said, I have been very privileged to be part of the community in Slovenia over the last number of years, particularly in relation to the business events and the MICE space. And Slovenia is such an incredible country, such huge potential, I think, as a destination for business events and for MICE. And I think we're seeing that more and more in terms of the inquiries that are coming in, the awareness that there is of the country, and the unique product development that's taking place in the country. I'm going to talk to you this morning briefly about some emerging themes from a really interesting survey that Goresh and the team at Congress also helped me to distribute. It's a survey that's undertaken annually by the IRF, FICP and CITE. So there are three different associations that are central really to the incentive travel industry on a global basis. And this survey has been undertaken each year for the last 3 years. So we have good historical background and good historical context as well to be able to to see where do we stand vis-a-vis where we were. And then also there's a very strong predictive forecasting element to it as well. So we also get from this survey quite a sense of where the industry is going in the future. The survey is called the Incentive Travel Industry Index, and I want to just give a shout out to the sponsors. I mentioned Goresh and the great team at Congress magazine, who are also wonderful supporters of this. But at champion level, we have Destination Canada, Abu Dhabi, Accor, and IMEX Group, all as kind of sponsors who are helping us to get this survey out as wide as possible in the industry. So jumping straight into it, in terms of demographics, well, who took the survey? Well, 2,882 incentive travel professionals took the survey in 41 source markets and 91 destinations. So we make a distinction between a source market and a destination as follows. A destination is a location or a country or a city or a region into which incentive travel is delivered, whereas a source market is where it is contracted from. So typically, Slovenia is more a source, it's more a destination than a source market. Great Britain would be both a source market and a destination. Germany would be both a source market and a destination. Ireland, the country that I'm from, is more a destination. So 41 source markets, which means very, very much kind of targeting those who are the organizers and the sellers of incentive travel as an experience in the corporate world. And we've got data from 41 of those locations around the world. And then we got data from 91 of the places in the world where incentive travel experiences are happening. And obviously Slovenia and emerging Europe in general is included in that. In terms of the industry verticals, there are 19 different industry verticals represented in the survey, but the top ones are finance and insurance, automotive, pharma, IT, and direct selling. Now, I think most of us who are in the industry, we know they are the sectors that are using incentive travel the most. Finance and insurance, sellers of insurance, programs to individuals and so on are frequently remunerated by their ability to qualify for an incentive travel program. The same in relation to car dealers, people who sell cars. That is a long and trusted way of helping them to tweak their performance and perform better if at the other end of the year there's the chance to participate in an incredible visit to Slovenia. So there you go. In terms of the industry itself, how did the survey break out? Well, between the buyer side, and that would be corporate and incentive house on the slide that you can see on your screen, we have about 46% respondents, which means that about 54 are coming from the supplier side. So that would be DMCs, suppliers like hotels, and then obviously DMOs. So that's the demographics. In terms of how it breaks down from a geographical perspective, about 43% of the respondents are North American, which means that the majority are not North American. They're from all other parts of the world, 57% altogether. So we've got a good section of that from the EMEA region, so Europe, Middle East, and Africa, 34%, Latin America, and APAC. What I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to give you some data that represents the aggregate kind of picture from all over the world. I will give that to you. I will give some regions, particularly regions that are important or well known or vital in terms of, I suppose, the trends that might be underlying. But I'm also going to give you data specifically from emerging Europe. And emerging Europe, I think Gorlash calls it New Europe, which is, I think, a great name for it. But it's certainly all of those countries that would previously have been perhaps in Eastern Europe. So from Poland all the way down, including Croatia, Slovenia, and so on. They're all in that new Europe or that emerging Europe. So that's just the picture there that shows you how the European piece was broken out between Western Europe and emerging Europe. So you can see the figure there as well. And it's a decent figure. One of the first questions that we asked this year, because of the year that was in it, 2020, obviously our entire year was defined by one thing, and that was the pandemic. So how did the pandemic impact on our businesses? And obviously the impact was devastating, that goes without saying. But we gave a number of different choices to businesses and asked them to rank these as well and choose the ones that represent more or less how the impact affected them. And what we're seeing here is that the impact did have a very wide-ranging sort of ripple effect for people. However, the number of businesses that actually closed as a result of the pandemic is relatively small. It's only 7%. And that's good news. In fact, most of the impacts we can describe as temporary. They're focused on things like cost cutting. But when we look in detail at what's here, there's lots of really interesting things emerging as well that are positive. Like, for example, people taking advantage of the pandemic to develop new skills, to develop new revenue streams, to achieve a better work-life balance. So that's very, very interesting. But there are big regional variations. So if I want to draw one thing to your attention here, and that's the making use of government supports, because when we look at the situation in Eastern Europe, by comparison with the global kind of aggregate situation, what we're seeing in Eastern Europe is a much, much stronger reliance on government supports in the time of pandemic. That probably kind of is continuous with, I suppose, the socio-cultural realities of Europe. We are a continent that values the supports that governments give to enterprises and that expects those. That's not the case necessarily in North America. So, for example, in the US, the making use of government supports is one of the least of the impacts because the government supports were not there. But interestingly, in Eastern Europe, what we're also seeing is even less impact in terms of businesses closing. It's only 1% as opposed to 7% in the aggregate. So more businesses availing of government supports in the emerging Europe. But if you look in detail at some of the other elements of the slides, what you're seeing is less entrepreneurial response overall. So less evidence of businesses saying, okay, what positive things can we do here in order to get out of this crisis? What way can we re-engineer? What way can we reset? And that's interesting that, in a way, the more government supports you're given, the more comfort you have. And with that comfort, there sometimes is a lack of entrepreneurial response. So that's what the data is telling us here. Around recovery, it's very interesting as well. insofar as what you're seeing on your screen with that brown line going across the middle is the 2019 levels that were achieved in the incentive travel world. So that's the 100% level. On the left-hand side, then, the extreme left-hand side, you're seeing the 2020 figure, and obviously all of the bars there are very low. So, for example, in all regions, business levels only got to 23% of that 100%. So that's the equivalent of a 77% fall in business levels in 2020 as a result of the pandemic. Okay, but look at the way that trend's going forward. So I'm following the blue, all of the regions. In 21, that gets up to 59%. So now I'm only 41% down on where I was in 2019. In 2022, that gets up to 88%. So now I'm only 12% down. And in 2023, in all regions of the world, I'm at 110%. So I have recovered. So that's what that graph is showing us. However, it's also showing us great regional variation, if you look. So not all of the bars are at the same levels. The colors are different. And as the years go by, the gap between those who are forecasting full recovery and those who are forecasting less recovery gets bigger. So if we take the 116%, the orange in 2023, that represents the USA, and the yellow represents Canada. So Canada is at 91% recovery. The USA is at 116%. But where's emerging Europe? Well, the fall in emerging Europe is even more dramatic than elsewhere. It's only at 17% of the 2019 levels, which means that's a fall of 83%. It's at 44%, so still not as high at all as the average, which is that 59 in blue. It's only at 77 in 2022. And then emerging Europe is only at 104% in 2023. So it's still recovery, because 100% is recovery, but is not as much recovery as the average. But interestingly, it's above Western Europe. So Eastern Europe and the emerging Europe, the new Europe that we refer to, is actually forecasting a more optimistic recovery by 2023 than the rest of Europe. So that's an interesting reality. Down to destination selection. And this is always a very interesting one to look at. So North America is obviously the area from which the most lucrative, the biggest incentive travel programs are coming. They're contracted from there. So North America is your source market. In 2019, you can see what the top 10 choices were. And good news, Western Europe in 4th position, but emerging Europe in 10th position. So emerging Europe, Slovenia, Poland, Ukraine, Montenegro, those kind of new markets are on the radar. In 2019, they're not on the radar. And in 2020, they're not on the radar at all. In fact, Europe as a consideration for North American buyers has fallen from 2nd position all the way down to 9th position in 2020. And that's obviously the impact of the pandemic. North American buyers in 2020 are staying close to home. So US, Canada, Hawaii, Caribbean, Mexico, Alaska, all close by. But look at Oceania. What's that doing in there? That's Australia, New Zealand, Tahiti. Why is that in 7th position and Western Europe in 9th position? Well, we think that's because of the extraordinary reputation and perception around safety in Australia and New Zealand as a result of the pandemic. I think everybody knows that New Zealand has probably been the most impressive country in the world in terms of its policies around protecting its people. And it is COVID-free now, and business as usual is taking place in New Zealand. So that's entered into our whole kind of psyche. And when we think of a safe country and a place that we would like to bring an incentive travel through, well, then we think of New Zealand and Australia in that regard. I put in UK buyers as well, because that's a big market for Slovenia, big market for emerging Europe. And again, what we're seeing here is we're seeing probably better news overall. In 2019, UK buyers were looking to the US as the place that they wanted to go to. In 2020, the US is in 15th position. Imagine that. It's dropped from number 1 down to 15. And Western Europe is looking at Western Europe. Great Britain is looking at Western Europe as its kind of destination of choice. But emerging Europe is still in there. It's very much in the top 10, which is good. UK buyers are also showing a willingness to get on planes and go to further destinations, like, for example, the Gulf states in Canada. But again, there's a perception of safety associated with that. And the next one then is just on the evolution of the DMC. And I know my time is coming fast to an end, but I do want to kind of spend a little time on the DMC sector because it's a big element of our survey and a very important element as well for many businesses in emerging Europe. And the questions that were asked here related to how the DMC community saw its own future. So in the context of COVID, with things changing as rapidly as they were, how did DMCs imagine that they would actually go forward and re-engineer their businesses? And the number one way that DMCs are doing that, and this is the emerging Europe figure, so this is kind of in your own region, the number one way was by becoming destination experts and providing destination services to all incoming visitors. So expanding out from the specialized area of MICE into the general kind of leisure as well. And in particular, what we're finding is many DMCs kind of focusing the unique products that they've created for the incentive market to the ultra-lux market or to the luxury market, because that's very likely going to recover before incentive travel. Luxury travelers are quite kind of, they're quite mobile, even at times when others are not. They can make decisions easily to come, and they're willing to pay for experiences if those experiences are good enough. So what better thing to do than to re-engineer that wonderful, unique, customized experience that you created for an incentive travel group and make it available to a high net worth individual that's traveling like that. I'll stop on that slide and go to the next one, because the one thing that we can say is that none of the DMC community is imagining that it's going to be operating largely the same in a post-COVID world. Only 24% believe that things will be the same. Program design is changing as well, and quite rapidly. In 2019, the key elements in program design were cultural experiences, group dining, team building, and luxury or bucket list experiences. In 2020, it's all about the intrinsic joy of travel. Give me a bucket list experience. Give me something that I've kind of dreamed about. Bring me to that castle in the middle of the lake that I've seen on those pictures. That's just so amazing, the lake in Lake Bled. That type of experience is really being front and center in those newly designed programs. Cultural experiences are up there as well, but look at CSR and look at wellness. They weren't figuring at all in 2019, but they're right in there in 2020. And that's also the case in relation to emerging Europe. So if we focus on the post-COVID activities that are going to be offered, well, first of all, it's going to be flexible, because we want to be able to allow people to make their own choice. We want to give a wide range of choice, and we don't want to herd people in large groups anymore, because that's kind of contrary to health kind of policies and advice. Activities in support of CSR. So maybe we are getting a little bit more focused on traveling with a conscience. If we travel, we want to travel in such a way that we can leave a legacy, and that legacy would be positive. So CSR coming in very strongly. Elements are available uniquely in the destination. So when you're designing as a DMC and offering your programs to the market, look at the ones that are uniquely available in your country. Then look, again, wellness is coming in there as well. How can you incorporate that into your program? 5K runs, spa treatments, and so on. And team building is still there as well in the emerging Europe. In terms of how programs are changing, I'll just jump to the conclusion here. It's all about participant safety. It's all about the perception of destination safety. And that was why New Zealand was coming out so high in those kind of considerations. There's a new focus on the DMC. Really, really great news for those of us who are in that sector. There's a new focus on what the DMC brings uniquely to the table as the agent in the destination that's able to mediate all of the safety elements as well as everything else. So the DMC as destination expert, but also as health and safety expert. It's going to be domestic. That's good news for Slovenian incoming operators. Those German programs that went to Thailand or to Brazil, they're going to stay local. They will come to Slovenia, they will go to Poland, they will go to Bulgaria. Value for money, it's always there. It needs to always be focused on. Shorter distances, very important. And then mountain locations. So again, Slovenia has this incredible image all around kind of the beautiful nature of its landscape. And that needs to be kind of highlighted because that is a key element in how programs are changing as well. So just to summarize, there's total alignment in this survey around the fact that incentive travel will recur. The question is not if, the question is when. There's alignment around recovery, but divergence around what it will look like. So we pointed out some of the differences in relation to the emerging Europe. There's a focus on the intrinsic joy of travel experiences. So less focus on kind of team-orientated activities or group activities, and more on just bring me somewhere that I've always wanted to go and let me experience it myself. CSR is also coming up in the rankings. Destinations that are perceived to have dealt well with COVID will recover quicker than others. The DMC evolution continues apace, and the future is all about safety, domestic and regional destinations. So that's my presentation. Delighted to be with you during Conventa. Delighted that we can continue to develop this wonderful tradition that's been going on for so long. And even though we're not face-to-face this year, at least we're in contact with each other, at least we're talking, at least we're connecting. So thank you on behalf of SITE, the Society for Incentive Travel Excellence. I want to wish you all the best and hope that we can really stay connected together. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Padraic, for great insights. I have some questions for you, short ones. First of all, about DMCs, and what can you say about this transition from PCOs, for example, to DCOs, from PCO to digital conference organizer? What can you say about it? Do you see this as a crucial thing for agencies or not?
It's absolutely crucial. Like for those agencies, I think probably the biggest, most dramatic evolution has taken place specifically for the PCO sector, so for the professional conference organizing sector, because many of the conferences that are organized are not around the kind of the optional sort of idea of having this event, and then if it doesn't happen, sure, it doesn't really matter. Medical conferences are all about knowledge transfer. They have to take place. That knowledge needs to be kind of shared. It needs to be circulated and socialized and so on. And if that doesn't take place, well, then a whole year is lost in the development of different scientific principles and medical sort of therapies and so on. So those conferences have to take place. And they quickly migrated to online, and the PCOs who would normally be booking the hotels, booking the convention centers, had to very, very quickly learn how to make that happen on behalf of their clients. But look how well they did it. It was really, it was the blind leading the blind in many respects, because many PCOs had not got that experience already, but they learned very fast. They partnered with their technology partners, and they actually learned very fast. And I think we have a whole new level of emerging expertise, particularly on the PCO side. I think they've done a spectacular job, and that's not going to change, Gorash. That's here forever. The genie is out of the bottle in terms of the whole idea of virtual. It's not going away. It will always be an element in how conferences are organized into the future. But we'll always prefer the face-to-face, and we'll always want the face-to-face. We'll just have this as an extra.
Very good. What can you say, Padraic, about the so-called digital event sector, growing like mushrooms now in all countries all over the Europe and in the world? What is your opinion about that sector, which is now actually obviously part of the story of the whole global meetings industry?
I think that the digital event sector has probably, it has. It's been like mushroom, and you know, in the context of that kind of rapid growth, there has been sort of there's been good and there's been bad. I think the digital agencies that are actually looking to the world of TV and films and movies and bringing into their teams a lot of the expertise that comes from that world, I think they're going to really prosper. Because I think we know now that there's a huge difference between a video conference call and a virtual event. And a virtual event needs to draw on the experience and the expertise and the techniques from 50 years of TV production, from 100 years of movie production. Because, you know, when we access information, knowledge, and entertainment from a screen, that's the new benchmark that we need to look to. It's not sufficient to just stick up a Zoom call. That's not going to work in the future. So those digital agencies that are serious, those digital agencies that are really truly creative, are expanding their staff, they're expanding their resources, and they're bringing in the creativity that has driven the film, movie, and TV industry for decades.
And my almost last question to you, Padraic, is if we look on different market segments, which segment will restart first and which last? You know, you can also focus on segment of incentive travel.
Incentive travel will probably be later because it's discretionary. It doesn't have to happen. It's not mission critical in many cases. Although I could also kind of make a very strong case and tell you that it is mission critical, but it won't be perceived as mission critical within a corporation or an organization. A sales meeting will be seen as mission critical, and they have to take place at key elements in the years. So I think meetings will come back. They'll come back in a hybrid format quickly enough. I think we're seeing that already. And, you know, we will learn how to do the in-person piece of it well and safely. So I would certainly kind of see the more mission-critical meetings coming back. But, you know, I'm going to say something controversial now. I think there's an element of our meetings industry that's not going to come back at all. And that element is the kind of the small transactional meeting, whereby, you know, a small team maybe from the London office gets on a plane and goes to the New York office, and they spend a couple of hours in the office and have dinner that evening, and then the team goes back the next day. That's not going to happen anymore. So the travel management companies that have actually probably been the ones most putting those kind of trips together, they'll lose that element of business because, you know, we know you can do that over a Zoom call. There's always something lost because we're not face-to-face. But what's lost in terms of what's gained on the positive side? What's gained on the positive side is obviously a lot of resource time, a lot of money, but also a lot, I think, of corporate social responsibility around the idea of, do I need to put my people on planes so much? So I think there's a reset happening, Gorash, that is going to have long-lasting impact on the industry at large. But equally saying that, there's no doubt an incentive travel experience will be more prized in the future than ever it was in the past. Because when you take something away from us, we want it even more. And I think that's why we're seeing things like bucket list experiences being highlighted in the ranking of what people want in incentive travel experiences, because they're the very things we miss. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. You know, every day I have a different opinion on this. Let me tell you that. Every day I change my mind. I look at statistics. You know, we always look at our own country. You know, Ireland was the #1 country at the beginning of December in terms of how well we were doing in combating the pandemic. We're now the last country in terms of how badly we're combating. You know, so it's as quick as that. This thing is a pestilence. And you know, it doesn't know anything other than its own kind of the way that it's programmed, that it's programmed to spread. And you know, until we have a very, very pervasive vaccination program, we're going to be in difficulty. I don't think I've any doubt about that.
Very interesting. And Padraic, what is your last piece of advice to regional meetings industry? You know very well the region, really you have insight to Slovenia and to other countries. What would be your piece of advice to everybody watching us now?
I think, you know, Slovenia has so many positive things in relation to the presentation that I just made. You know, if you look at, you know, program design, if you look at the elements in a program that buyers are now looking for, Slovenia kind of offers all of those in terms of it's an outdoors destination, fundamentally. That's what it's about. It's about nature. It oozes the idea of safety and health, which again that's part of the zeitgeist now. We absolutely want healthfulness and we want energy that comes from the outdoors. So these are all things that are part and parcel of the Slovenia brand. And, you know, so we just need to talk about them more and more and more because, you know, the concept of falling on deaf ears, this is falling on ears that are wide open, you know, and I think, you know, other things that sort of come out in the survey in relation to where people want to go is they want to stay away from crowds. They want to take the path less traveled. They want to go where they're not going to be overrun with other kind of visitor numbers and so on. So bigger destinations that have, you know, long brand positions like France and Italy, well, they'll always do well, but people will think twice sometimes in relation to, well, should I really be in Venice? You know, during kind of in the aftermath of the pandemic. And I think in that context, Slovenia offers a huge, huge alternative and option. And then I think that the fact that Slovenia is within train distance or even driving distance of so many good source markets, I think that's a huge option for Slovenia. So I think I would focus on that as well. I would focus on nearby markets. You know, the ones that are surrounding you. So Italy, Switzerland, Austria, into Germany. You know, there's huge kind of, they're huge source markets and they have great kind of potential for Slovenia.
Padraic, thanks a lot for your insight and that you cooperate and share your ideas with us. Thanks a lot. And I hope that we meet each other soon, or at least I believe we will meet at Conventa in August 2021.
Welcome to Conventa. Explore, meet,